I am a loser and I am completely lost. That is something I told myself every single day in my late 20s, specifically around 28 to 30. And during that time, I had such a strong sense of stress and anxiety. And I think this is very common for people around that age. Facing your 30s, right? You're facing your 30s and you're really questioning yourself, what am I doing with my life? Have I done enough work to live up to the standards that I've held for myself all this time? I see this girl on Facebook. She has a perfect life. She has this amazing career. She's traveling. She's doing all this stuff. Like, why am I not doing that? What's wrong with me? And if you're feeling this way and you're around the age of 28, 30 or 57, 60, this is actually very common and you're not alone. And you're definitely not a loser. It's just you are going through your Saturn return. In this video, we're going to explore what the Saturn return is and its impact. I'm going to share my personal story as well as some celebrity stories that align with this theme. And then I'm not going to leave you hanging. I'm going to make sure I give you some practical tips to navigate this period of time. If you're interested in this type of content, keep watching. Now, my name is Bianca. I am an astrologer. I provide readings. You can always go to fourthhouselb.com. I provide readings. I also do tutoring. So if you're ever kind of stuck on concepts in astrology, you can always hit me up and we can do a thing. But just check out my website. It's great. And also, most importantly, give me a like and subscribe because I'm building my channel up from the ashes of something else. So your love and support always will be appreciated. Thank you. So it starts at 28. At 28, objectively on paper, my life was pretty good. It was married, had a child, finished my undergrad, and actually I was working on my master's program. Did not quite have a job yet. So because I had left work, basically after I had my son, I left my job. And I went back to school. So I could spend more time with him. It was a night program, so I could spend more time with him in the day. And then at night, I'll go to school. Cool, whatever. The thing about, and so objectively on paper, everyone thinks that my life is perfect and that I have the best setup ever. And I'm very blessed and happy. But there's a point, there's a soul thing that happens sometimes when you are not doing what your purpose is supposed to what your purpose is. In astrology, there's maybe your North Node, maybe lessons that you need to work out, karmic lessons you need to work out. There's different things that a person might be called to handle in their life that's outside of the traditional or the binary situation of a woman of she works from home or she stays at home or she works. There's way more options, even if you just stick with the archetypal 12 options, if I'm not achieving any, my purpose within the 12 things, then I can't necessarily feel fulfilled, right, in my life. And so there were some things that I wasn't able, for me, a sense of purpose was missing. And I was always looking for that. And my career choices have always been really based off of intuition. And I'm very happy that I did that because at the time when I was 28, I didn't know, I picked up a lot of different skills. I had studied all types of things and I had been exposed to, I went on mission trips and I studied music, I studied all these things that just didn't seem like they all came to one solid, offering, So I struggled with that. I had a strong sense of shame around that. And, a lot of, I go on Facebook and see people, getting promoted and having these careers. Because at the time, my career was just still kind of I was non-existent, really. I worked, but it wasn't like a career, with purpose. And so I would be very sad. And I would see people, who came out of the gate out of high school just knowing what they were going to do, had said, I'm going to do this, or maybe figured it out halfway through college. And then they made the steps, took the jobs, did the internships that got them where they needed to be to get to the goal that they were in. And so they're doing fabulous very early. And I struggled with that, I really did. So Saturn returns tend to bring up themes of goals and accomplishments and achievements, as well as how have I matured, and have I learned enough, and have I done enough compared to other people in my peer group. There's a lot of comparing during Saturn return period, especially in the beginning part of it, the supplying part of it, the early stages of it, because you're really questioning, oh my God, like this person has this and I don't have this and I really want that. And so it can make you have a strong sense of shame. Like it really does. Social media really makes you feel like crap. It makes you feel inadequate anyways. So that was feeding into it as well. So it wasn't until I was safely in my 30s that I really understood my strengths and understood that the skills that I had learned weren't scattered, but they were allowing me to develop a really diverse understanding of the world around me so I could be the best person, employee, entrepreneur, or wife and mother that I could possibly be. But it took time for me to really sit with that and think about it. Like that was the thing. I shamed myself for so long because I was very curious about the world and I wanted to learn so much. I didn't just focus on one thing and just say, okay, this is what I want to do. I really wanted to just absorb everything. And I shamed myself about it. And it wasn't until I was 30 that I realized, hey, I have these strengths and I can show up in this way. This is what I can offer. And this is how I work. And when I come into a work setting or a group setting or whatever, this is what I provide to the space. And knowing that took a long time, and getting past that hump of the 30s, really takes time. But if you can really just listen to the lessons that Saturn is trying to show you, it can really take you to the next level. So some things I learned during that period was, one, we're all miserable together. Between 28 and 30, we're just all trying to figure it out. And we're all having the same types of questions on this archetypal level. It can be applied in different areas of our lives, whether it's career, or romance or whatever. But at the end of the day, we are really questioning, what have we achieved? And it's okay. Another thing that I learned was that, hard work, especially with my Saturn in Capricorn, hard work is a manifestation tool for me. I can, especially with Mars, and I have Mars in Capricorn, so I can outwork anyone. I'm not the smartest person, but I could put in a lot of hours and get things done. And a lot of people get tired. A lot of people have to take breaks. A lot of people have to do a lot of just take breaks and things like that. I could literally work 24 hours and not stop. Now, is that healthy? That's a whole other conversation. But on a more balanced level, hard work for me has been a huge thing that I could use to achieve the life that I want and achieve the things that I want. So, and the third thing was that, again, Saturn in the fourth house, that I wanted to break ancestral trauma and to pass down a legacy to my family, to my children, through financial means, through professional means, and by paving a way for their future so they could just walk down the road and have a slightly easier path. Creating my own business so that they know that they don't have to be a cog in the wheel, and that they can create their own wheel and their own cogs themselves. And so these types of things really became real to me and clear to me once I got past my 30s. So I ended up having a strong sense of purpose around my family and what I'm trying to build and help build for us. So Saturn return occurs again between 28 and 30. Also 57 to 60 for the second Saturn return, and 84 to 90 for the third Saturn return, if you're lucky enough to experience that. And it just is representing a critical juncture in people's lives. And so again, it characterizes maturity, self-discovery, and is a time where you reevaluate your life choices and accomplishments. So the Saturn returns tend to have a cumulative effect. So I say this, and I think Saturn in general has that energy where most transits do, but like I think Saturn does specifically, because you get out what you put in with Saturn. If you work hard, you're not going to feel the strong impact of Saturn. You know, if you do the homework, if you learn the lessons that are required for you at that time, it's not going to be as difficult as if you weren't willing to learn the lessons and work hard for the things that you want.
So it's important to highlight that no matter what, people will be having a period of introspection and trying to understand where are they at and really looking at the choices they made in their life. But whether you were someone who was working really hard in school, doing, working, many jobs, trying to build a life for yourself, or if you're a person who might have got caught up in the wrong things, the wrong lifestyle, substances, whatever, addiction or what have you, around this time, you will find a sense of, or feel a sense of anxiety and angst around your life and what are you doing. And so usually around 28, there is this pivotal moment of action and saying, hey, like I need to make a choice. I need to make some type of change. I don't know what, but I need to make a change. Now, if they don't, again, it's going to be a compounding effect on the things that they spend their time on, right? Saturn is really, what do you spend your time on? You spend time on doing illegal things or doing things to people that are not good, right? Like being a negative force in people's lives. You're going to have more consequences build up on that. Because wherever Saturn is, there's a huge lesson that you should be learning around the area that Saturn is in your chart. And so round 28 is your first opportunity to look at your life and look at the choices you've made. And it's your opportunity to be like, okay, let's make a change.
So I'm going to use Miley Cyrus's chart to explain the Saturn return. So technically, Saturn return is when Saturn completes its orbit around the sun and returns to the same position it held at the time of your birth. And so it signifies a time of significant life changes, challenges, self-reflection, and it prompts the individual to reassess their goals and direction in life. There are three major phases I think that are worth noting for Saturn return: this applying period, the exact period, and then like the separating period. And during each of these phases, the individual will go through various stages of their Saturnian development. And so what that means when it's applying is that Saturn, the transiting Saturn, is in the degrees before it hits exactly at 13 Aquarius, which is the natal Saturn's position. And so during this phase, the individual may feel a sense of impending changes that need to happen, experiencing a heightened awareness of dissatisfaction. So it is a time where you're just feeling, I don't really feel satisfied with what I'm doing, where I'm at in life. Very on brand with what I've talked about in my story, and I'm sure some of you feel that way. And also just this feeling of needing to make a change and to transform your life radically. So you have this feeling that there's something, like you have to make a change. By the time, and so this is where at this point in 2020, late 2020, this is more of an approaching / applying energy.
And around 2020, late 2020 was when Miley Cyrus was really assessing her legacy, who she wants to be. She had a relapse during COVID, basically during the lockdown. And I think a lot of people struggled during the lockdown and had to face a lot of their own demons. But for her, it caused her to relapse again. And she became scared of the fact that she relapsed and that could be a potential for her, and she didn't want to die young. She knew that a lot of pop stars and a lot of people in the industry just die young, and that weighed heavily on her. And what was her legacy going to be? Someone who was just erratic and a mess and had great potential but didn't use it and lost it and wasted it. So that was something that was really heavy on her mind as she was entering her in the beginning stages of her Saturn return, and this is the applying period.
Let's just say once it gets to 13 degrees Aquarius, that is the exact phase marking the peak intensity of Saturn's influence, bringing about significant life events, challenges, and the pressure is on to address these unresolved issues. So it becomes situations around you start bubbling up that are almost manifestations of the things that you haven't been learning. And it's really trying to apply pressure and be like, girl, are you going to take this lesson? Are you going to listen? Are you going to learn? Like, what are you doing? What are we going to do? And usually during the separating phase is when individuals start working towards integrating their lessons learned, over the last year and a half, 2 years, and start implementing the changes and solidifying a new life direction based on the experiences of their Saturn return. So that's something that's worth talking about because, when you think about your Saturn return and people talk about the 2-year period, that is a 2-year period. But what happens in that period of time? So I wanted to highlight that. So this points out to the fact that you definitely need to cast your own chart. You need to know what's in it. You need to know what are the themes that are being addressed. And, Miley Cyrus had her Saturn return in her career house. Okay. So that was probably a huge period of her. And I think some of the Saturn return has to do with how she emerged in this most recent few years with her new career and stuff like that. And Miley Cyrus is problematic, I know, whatever. But at the same time, I think that, you can make mistakes and fall in a pocket of understanding, okay, this is where I need to go. And for her career, I feel like she had a resurgence right after this. So this is a perfect example of how important it is to know where your Saturn is and what houses and signs it's impacting. So the next chart I wanted to show you was Jeff Bezos's chart. Jeff Bezos is the founder and former CEO of Amazon. And he had a very public affair / divorce that happened in the last few years. And the last I saw him, he's been living his life with his she used to be his mistress, but now his fiance. So as of May, they got engaged. So he is actually within orb of his Saturn return. So he's still he's just solidifying and firming up things he's done thus far. So some things to think about, because I really liked his chart because he had some interesting events happen. During both of his Saturn returns. So I'm going to look at first in 1993. So first I want to look at Jeff Bezos' chart from 1993, specifically January 1st, 1993. And that's the date that he got married to Mackenzie, the woman that he just had a divorce, who he just divorced. His marriage technically had just gone through or was about to go through its own Saturn return. Fun fact as well, Amazon was founded a year later after they got married. Once they got married, they moved to Seattle, and then they were founded the year after that, which is very interesting. I think it's another thing that's to highlight is that Saturn, he's not only is he in the midst of a Saturn return, he's also in the middle of a Venus return. And Saturn and Venus are tightly associated, being in conjunction. So the idea of money and relationships in conjunction with his sense of duty and responsibility and what he works for and spends his time on is really connected.
Also, with Saturn and Venus being conjunct each other, every time I see Saturn, I do kind of like to think Saturn of like in a way of what do you spend your time on? What is the work that you do in this life? And so obviously Saturn's in Aquarius, he's in the tech industry. It's very interesting, blah, blah, blah. But then you have Venus conjunct it, and like that there's almost like this relationship element, that maybe his relationships, his love interests, his wife, his marriage was also tightly connected to the work that they were doing. And again, as I said earlier, Amazon was created a year later, but I misspoke and I didn't say that Mackenzie was a huge person or element or part of the development and the beginnings of Amazon. So there was this close tie, like almost like a business relationship. So part of me, we could probably do a whole other video on just like what is the relationship, the nature of the relationship like. And I think a lot of their relationship had a lot of business elements to it, like, okay, we're building together. Venus and Saturn together can scream business, marriage that is around duty and responsibility, and it can be a little bit on the cold side, especially with Venus being in Aquarius. There can be a little bit more of a colder type of relationship. I don't want to say transactional, but kind of a little bit on that wave. So,
and that's how this is an era or a time that he was really developing himself and coming into his own. The difference between the first Saturn return and the second Saturn return is that the first one, you are really doing trial and error, and you're still trying to build. You're trying to really do the final push to create something, versus the second Saturn return, if you've done it right, you have accomplished something, you have done your great work, you have done the work, and you're looking back in your accomplishments and your achievements, and you are trying to look at how fulfilled you have been in the goals that you've set and reflect on your legacy and the impact that you've had on people. So this is where he's at right now in the second Saturn return. And I think it's really funny because even though his divorce was not encompassed or part of his Saturn return, I do think that it was an activation point for him to kind of get into the right direction of where he wanted to go, to kind of start thinking about, okay, all right, what am I doing here? Like, what am I doing? So the date that I have here, which is July 4th, 2021, is the day that he actually stepped down as CEO of Amazon. And so I think it's very interesting that, again, it's a full cycle moment for him. And it's a full cycle moment where he can release it and kind of, enjoy the spoils of his heart and the hard work. I'm curious how this is going to manifest with his relationship with his, once mistress, now fiance. He's still in his Saturn return. So is this a manifestation of some type of liberation that he's been looking for his whole life? I don't know. Only time will tell. So the next chart I'm going to look at is Sylvester Stallone's chart. His chart is a perfect case study in how Saturn can really suppress your ability to break through in an area until you have your Saturn return. So there are a set of actors and famous people and just celebrities that just could not pop until after they were 30. Like, it just did not happen for them. And so I have a theory that some of it has to do with Saturn return. So I looked up a list of actors that just didn't, or people who were not famous until after 30. And I saw Sylvester Stallone. And I hope I typed his name in. I think it's right. Well, hopefully. And he didn't get famous and get the actual worldwide fame until he was 32. But there were a lot of events that were triggered in order for him to get to where he was. Now, Sylvester Stallone is an actor, an American actor, filmmaker, and screenwriter. and he's known for his roles in Rocky and the Rambo franchise. So before the release of Rocky in 1976, he had struggled a lot. He had taken really crappy jobs, acting roles, a lot of, he was homeless at sometimes. And he was also at one point things where he was down so bad that he had to take up some roles in softcore adult films. So, and it wasn't until his Saturn Return, or when, actually, and I'll show you here, it wasn't until right here, March 24th of 1975, he had been inspired. He had gone and seen a Muhammad Ali and Chuck, I think it's like Chuck, like a Chuck Welf or whatever. I forget, another, like a fight between Muhammad Ali and some other Chuck guy. And he was really inspired by it. So that this day he went home and wrote in 3 days the first draft of the Rocky movie. It is such an activation point because first the Sun and Saturn are both in Cancer in the 7th house, so it's already being activated. And then you have Saturn, the ruler of you have the ruler of the Sun in Cancer, being the moon, conjunct his midheaven. So this moment where he is inspired to write this script is affecting his identity. It's affecting his ability to possibly have some type of breakthrough when it comes to his career and his luck when it comes to this.
And though Saturn is not with an orb of his natal Saturn, it's, making contact to his sun, his sense of identity. And Saturn, whenever it transits an area, because it's this planet of restriction and structure, what it can sometimes do for a person is help create the vessel in which a person can get things done. And maybe the thing that they've been trying to achieve for so long has been really nebulous and hard for them to capture, understand. And, the sun is in Cancer. Cancer is a water sign. And so, Saturn is coming in there, kind of creating a vessel for that person to present an offering and to have clarity about what they need to do in order to get to the next step. And so that's really what that script did for his life. It gave him a path to break through and make the change that he wanted.
So he starts shopping around his script, and he made it very clear that he wants to be the main character for this role. He got a little pushback, but ultimately he started production in January of 1976. So we're going to go to January. So I don't know exactly when, so I'll put January 24th. I don't know what January 24th is, but 1976. And now you have Saturn in retrograde. So Saturn goes into retrograde during this period of time. So it's obviously highlighting that there's his Saturn return. Well, it had a lot of ebbs and flows, maybe a lot of forward momentum, and then a lot of periods of time where he's like, is this going to work? So I'm sure that was a very challenging and stressful time for him. However, especially since it's kind of at the peak and it's again riding like this exact point, the Saturn return is just rubbing on his actual natal Saturn. So this might have been a really stressful time and anxiety inducing time for him, because I'm sure he's so close, right? He's finally gotten something that he's created and got a role for that. And so I think that's just something interesting to think about. So in November 21st of 1976, Rocky is released in theaters, and the rest is history. I think he was nominated for 8 or 10, or the movie was nominated for 10 Oscars. So he did really well, and that actually, obviously propelled him into stardom that we know him as. At the end of the day, this chart highlights how sometimes Saturn can really just release you of the bondage that you've had in that specific area. So if you've had difficulties in relationships, sometimes Saturn return will release you of that. If you had issues with your career, sometimes your Saturn return will release you with that. So hopefully this was a helpful example of a nice chart. I love this chart. And now I'm going to share with you some practical tips to navigating your Saturn return. Number 1, goal setting is really important during this time. I want you to ask yourself, what do you want in your life? And where do you want to be in 5, 10, 20 years? Where do you want to be? I do think that this could be helped. This process could be helped with help with a friendly neighborhood astrologer. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to me. But even without any external help, it's really important to reflect and meditate on these topics. As far as what do you want? Like, what do you want in your life? And where do you see yourself in 5, 10, and 20 years? You also want to learn to do introspection work, right? And to do postmortems on, what are the skills that you've accumulated in the past few years or over your lifetime? And what are things that you've tried that doesn't work, that determine or kind of highlight your strengths and your weaknesses? You really do need to do a SWOT analysis of yourself. Like, what are your strengths, your weaknesses, what are opportunities for you, and what are some things that can really hamper you? That's external factors. What are some things that are keeping you from being able to be great that are external factors? So honestly, just do a SWOT analysis on yourself for my business school friends. And then also establish 5 actionable goals, that you could put into action and you can commit to over the next 2 years. So again, lay these out, and maybe they have different timelines, and maybe it might take a little longer to get those things going, but make sure that's actionable. Like, for example, my sister has a plan or a goal to cut out gluten, and so she loves bread. She can't cut out gluten like that, but she knows she has to. So she's taking steps by researching alternative flours and kind of putting all the pieces in front of her so that she can actually put the pieces together when she's finally ready and has all the answers to how she wants to move forward. So it's just something to consider. Another tip is to please reach out to a friend that is going through the same life stage as you, because and don't assume anything. Really ask them and be vulnerable and be like, you know what, it sucks out here, doesn't it? And they will probably agree and say it's terrible. And you guys can have an opportunity to build support and camaraderie around that. If you don't have any friends in your 28, I highly recommend finding life stage groups. So there's meetup.com where you can find friends that are kind of going through the same or in the same age, and just go to an event and just pluck off one person from an event and just see if you can connect with one person. You don't need a ton of friends, you just need one person. And finally, make sure to utilize self-care practices and mindfulness exercises in order for you to learn to cope with the stress and anxiety that you will be experiencing during this time. And that is it for my Saturn return video. Make sure to comment down below if you're going through Saturn return, how is it going? Or if people have just completed their Saturn return, give hope to some people down in the comment section. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.